Hey, this is Owen. If you're comfortable, leave your first name and state at the sound of the tiny truck backing up.
Hey, Owen, this is CJ from North Carolina again. When I think about the times that I spent in church and everything as a Christian, there's a lot of stuff that maybe it wasn't super harmful, but it was just very cringe. I was wondering if you had any interesting stories about things that you have said and done that were just very cringe.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the cringiest shit that ever happened in my young life was probably the things that my mom did and not things that I did necessarily. My mom used to be the person, the Jehovah's Witness, who would she'd give answers at the meetings because they have a segment, like a question and answer segment, where they read a piece of propaganda to you, then they ask the audience a question, and the audience raises their hand and regurgitates basically what they just heard from that propaganda piece to affirm exactly what they're trying to cement in your mind. So, anyways, my mom would be the one that would give 2 3 minute long answers that were entirely too personal, like way too fucking personal. She also actually asked, there was a woman that was studying at the Kingdom Hall, like trying to become a Jehovah's Witness, you know? And my mom asked her how far along she was, and she was not pregnant. That's not a specifically religious thing. That's just so fucking. My mom was just an incredibly cringy person. Here's another one, okay? When I was young, apparently. So my dad was in a wheelchair. Turns out he has Munchausen syndrome. He didn't actually need the wheelchair. That's a different story for a different day. But he would call in to the meetings, like the Jehovah's Witness meetings. He'd call in on the phone and listen in while we were at home so that we could still participate or whatever else, right? I just found out not long ago from an ex Jehovah's Witness that I knew in my old congregation when I was younger. He told me that there was some mix up with the phone system, and my dad was like yelling at us and berating us and screaming during the meeting with the phone unmuted, and it came in through the speaker system right in the middle of the meeting. That's pretty fucking cringy. That's some shit that keeps me up at night thinking about all that. My dad, as most of you know, is very, very abusive physically and mentally. But aside from that, I actually asked this question out of curiosity on YouTube and on Twitter. I asked, what are the cringiest things you've ever done as a cult member or a religious person? And I got some interesting answers, so I figured we'd take a look at the top ones. Here's the top answer. This is from CloudFa11. In high school, I was part of a Christian club, and we would walk around the campus during lunch holding hands, standing in a circle, and praying. We would stand by the trophies and ask God to strip the athletes of their pride. We would stand by the awards and ask God to strip the academics of their pride and worldly desires, etc. Wow, was I cringy back then. We all were, CloudFa11. We all were. LK, I stopped being religious a long time ago. Cringiest thing I can remember doing was actually crying at those pro-life movie maker slideshow videos of the fetus talking when in its mother's womb and screaming when it was aborted. Lol. I was 7 or something. Wow, that's disturbing. The Fields. I forced myself to cry during the first God's Not Dead movie because I thought it would impress a Christian girl and show her my soft side. I cringe to this day. That's pretty fucking cringy. Let's take a look at one more. Prayed and cried in front of a Christmas tree because I hadn't turned straight yet. Still haven't, lol. That's pretty cringy. We've all done some pretty cringy shit. I just thought it was interesting to revisit some of that. So anyway, thank you for the voicemail. I appreciate it.
Hey, Owen. My name's Brian. I've always had this wonder because I've listened to like a lot of videos you talk about stuff, and with Trump pastors, what I'm wondering though is that what's the motive? Like, what's the payout that they're wanting to get? Like, are they worried that Biden's going to make them lose their tax exempt status? Are they worried that their following is going to die out because the world's going more atheist? Like, what is the motive behind the Trump pastors?
So I've been talking about these Trump pastors for a while now. People like Johnny Enlow and Hank Kunneman and others. These pastors have prophesied that God gave them a vision that told them that God was going to make Trump president again for 2020. And, of course, it didn't come true. So, first of all, what was the point in them doing that in the first place? And second, why do they even give a shit if Trump's president, right? That's basically what I'm picking up as the question. I hope I didn't put words in your mouth or twist it around or something like that. As far as I can tell, their motive is they genuinely, to the bottom of their hearts, believe that Trump is the savior of America. It's a nationalistic kind of thing. There's a difference between patriotism and nationalism. With patriotism, you take pride in your country, and it can go way over the top, absolutely. With nationalism, not only do you take pride in your country, but you believe that it is the best, and it can't be criticized, and every other country fucking sucks. So these pastors have this hyper-nationalistic identity, this nationalist idea of Trump and the country and everything else, this right-wing bubble that they live in. And I think that's why they do it. I think that's why they make these prophecies and are just completely obsessed with Trump. I don't think that they genuinely fear that Biden is going to take their tax-exempt status. I think they fearmonger with that. They try to scare the shit out of people to keep them coming to church, keep them donating, and keep them believing. But I don't really think that in their hearts, many of them actually believe that's going to happen. I don't know. I'm speculating. We have no way of knowing if they really believe that. Ultimately, the answer to your question is because they're brainwashed. That's their motive, really. They really believe it, I think, in most cases.
How often do atheist Jehovah's Witnesses go back into the religion, especially if they were 100% atheist and weren't halfway out of the faith?
Interesting question. I think, for me, atheism is a one-way street. It's like once the wool is pulled away from your eyes, you realize how absolutely, completely fucking ridiculous the whole thing is. Not just with Jehovah's Witnesses, not just with Mormonism, not just with extreme cults. The whole premise from the start. Like, come on. You're trying to convince me that one guy and his family built a gigantic fucking boat before nails existed and got every single animal in the world, from the North Pole, from the South Pole, from Australia, New Zealand, China, South America, North America, all of them. Got all of those things together, 2 of the clean, 7 of the unclean from one section, or just 2 of each from another, and loaded them all onto a boat and sailed for a year. The whole thing is completely absurd from beginning to end, and it's a one-way street for me. Like, now that I see how completely absurd it is, there's no going back, honestly, for me. So I think if you get to my point with it, like seeing how absurd it is, the number is probably 0 or damn near it. But the brainwashing does stick with you for a long time as a Jehovah's Witness. I believed it. So I left the religion when I was 18. Basically, on my 18th birthday, I got disfellowshipped. There's somewhere in there. And I still believed it for like 4 years afterward. Kylie was born, and she was like 3 when I finally started to realize that Jehovah's Witnesses were full of shit. Their brainwashing gets in deep. So I would say, if we're just talking how many Jehovah's Witnesses come back, I would say reasonably high number, actually. Non-zero number. I would say maybe 30 to 40%. I'm just guessing. That's not an accurate statistic, so take it with a grain of salt. As far as people who have come along in their journey as far as I have, atheist Jehovah's Witnesses, I would say it's a very fucking tiny number. I can't imagine anybody getting to my point and then going back to Jehovah's Witnesses. That seems very improbable to me. Back when I was a Christian, they said it was only 40 days. It's still stupid, though. Yes, it did. I remember that part. It said that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but they stayed in the ark for 1 year. Lucifer Lafleur, I was an atheist going back to the Kingdom Hall, so my friends and family would talk to me. That's a statistic you got to think about. Interesting. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I'm sure there are a lot of people who go back to the Kingdom Hall and get reinstated just so that their friends and family will talk to them, and then they just kind of fade away. I did consider doing that at one point, but I realized that if I did do that, I couldn't get away with complaining that my mom is trying to brainwash Kylie. So I decided not to do it because I didn't want my mom to have the opportunity to brainwash her, basically. Just different life situation, you know. Birdie Gamer Studios, do you think your fallout with the teacher in West Virginia was all for nothing? No, I don't. Absolutely not. The teacher didn't face any consequences from it, as far as I can tell, but it raised awareness about what happens in southern schools. It showed people exactly what happens when you push back against that kind of thing. Just people being aware of the situation, knowing what happens in those situations, and knowing what people go through is enough for me. I'm glad it happened still. I'm glad that I went through that experience, and I'm glad that I had the whole community behind me the whole way. That I couldn't have asked for a better group of people to help me and work with me through that whole situation. You guys were all just the shit through everything. In that situation, I would have done it again. I feel that the criticisms that I levied were reasonable and as honest as I could make them, and she really did break the law, so whether she likes that or not.